No matter how many times you fall, the only thing that matters is how you rise back up. Witness the incredible strength of the human spirit in our latest collection of cinematic stories about hope and renewal. Subscribe now and rise with us in every new episode.
My name is Dorothy Mae Calloway. I was born in the summer of 1959 in the back bedroom of my mother's house in Decatur, Georgia. The same house where I learned to walk, learned to pray, and learned that the people who love you the most can sometimes be the ones who hurt you the deepest. I am 65 years old. I retired 3 years ago after 31 years of teaching 4th grade at Riverside Elementary. My husband Gerald passed in the spring of 2021 after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. We were married for 38 years. He was a quiet man who fixed things with his hands and never raised his voice at me once. When he left, he took a piece of my daily purpose with him, and I spent the better part of a year just learning how to be alone in our house without hearing his footsteps in the hallway. I have one son. His name is Marcus. Marcus is 37 years old. He is a physician assistant at a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. He makes good money. He has a wife named Brianna who works in pharmaceutical sales, and they have a 4-year-old daughter named Chloe who I adore more than I can put into words. They live in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. They take vacations. They drive new cars. By every measure that the world uses to keep score, my son has done well for himself. I want you to hold that picture in your mind, because everything I am about to tell you happened against that backdrop. A mother who spent 31 years shaping other people's children. A son who became exactly what she prayed for. And somewhere between the grief of losing Gerald and the joy of being Chloe's grandmother, I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening right in front of me. I want to tell you how I found out. It started 14 months after Gerald died. Marcus called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because he typically called on Sunday afternoons. I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table going through some paperwork from Gerald's pension, still trying to untangle the administrative threads of a life that had ended too soon. When I saw his name on my phone, I felt that particular warmth that only a mother knows. I picked up on the first ring. He asked how I was doing. We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. Then he said, "Mama, I hate to even bring this up, but we've hit a little rough patch with timing. I had a bill come due that overlapped with some of Chloe's medical stuff, and I'm just short about $800 until my next pay cycle." I would never ask. But I told him not to say another word. I transferred $800 that same night. I didn't think twice. This was my son. He had never asked me for anything like this before. Gerald and I had always taught him to be independent, and as far as I knew, he had been. I told myself it was a one-time thing, an overlap. Life happens to everyone, but then it happened again. 6 weeks later, a different Tuesday call. This time it was $1,200. The reason was that Brianna's car had needed unexpected brake work, and the credit card they normally use for emergencies was, as Marcus explained it, temporarily maxed out from the holidays. He said he would pay me back within the month. I sent the money. He did not pay me back within the month. I sent the money. He did not pay me back within the month. I told myself I hadn't really expected him to. Parents help their children. That is part of the arrangement. Gerald and I had talked about this. About how we hoped Marcus would never need much from us once he was established, but that if he ever did, we would be there. I was honoring a conversation I had with my husband. That is what I told myself. By the 8th month, I had a spreadsheet. I had started keeping notes because my memory is not what it used to be, and I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally count the same transfer twice when I did my own budgeting. When I printed that spreadsheet and sat down with a cup of coffee to look at it clearly, my hands went still. March 14th, $800. April 29th, $2,200. June 3rd, $650. July 17th, $2,000 for Chloe's specialist visit and deductible. August 22nd, $900. October 4th, $1,500 for manger repair. November 11th, $700 for furnace repair. November 11th, $700. December 19th, $1,800. Described as just to get through the holidays without putting more on the card. The total over 8 months was $9,550. I sat with that number for a long time, $9,550. From a retired school teacher living on a pension and Gerald's Social Security survivor benefit. From a woman who clips coupons on Sunday mornings and turns the thermostat down to 68 at night because the heating bill still surprises her. From a woman whose son earns, by his own telling, more in a month than she earns in a quarter. I didn't call him that night. I needed to think. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't feel rage. I felt something quieter and much sadder than rage. I felt like I was looking at a picture that had been hanging crooked on the wall for months, and I had finally tilted my head at just the right angle to see it clearly. Something was wrong, and it had been wrong for a while, and I had been too grateful for his phone calls and too hungry for his company to let myself see it. I started paying attention differently after that. I noticed that the reasons always came with just enough detail to be plausible and just enough vagueness to be unverifiable. I noticed that he never mentioned paying me back anymore, and if I gently referenced it, he would pivot immediately to asking about my health or bringing up something funny Chloe had said. I noticed that Brianna was always nearby during these calls, but never came on the line directly. She would sometimes speak in the background, just loudly enough for me to hear, and the things she said were always about money being tight or bills being complicated. Like a stage direction. Like someone had written her lines. I called my sister, Paulette. She lives in Atlanta and she has known Marcus his whole life, and she loved Gerald like a brother. I told her the number. There was a long silence on her end of the phone. Then she said, "Dorothy, what are you doing?" I said I was trying to understand. She said, "Baby, what are you doing?" I said I was trying to understand. She said, "Baby, what is there to understand? You're on a fixed income and your son has a salary and you've given him nearly $10,000 in 8 months. What are you waiting to understand?" I told her I didn't want to accuse him of something if there was an explanation. She asked me what explanation I was hoping for. I didn't have a good answer. About 3 weeks after my conversation with Paulette, I was on the phone with my friend Carol, who lives 2 streets over and whose daughter works in finance. I wasn't talking about Marcus specifically, I was talking in general terms about feeling financially uncertain in retirement, and Carol mentioned something almost in passing. She said her daughter had told her once that when someone asked to borrow money from a fixed income relative regularly, and the amounts keep increasing, and there's never a repayment plan discussed, it almost never has anything to do with an emergency. It has to do with a lifestyle that person doesn't want to adjust. I said nothing, but I heard every word. The call that changed everything came on a Saturday in February. Marcus called to tell me that Brianna's parents were coming to visit from out of state the following weekend. Her father had just finished treatment for a health issue, and they wanted to celebrate. Marcus said he was planning to take everyone out for a nice dinner on Saturday evening. Brianna's parents, Brianna's younger sister and her husband, and of course little Chloe. He asked if I might be able to help with the dinner. I asked what he meant by help. He said the restaurant he had in mind was a nice place, and that with that many people the bill could run somewhere between $400 and $500, and with everything being so tight right now, he would really appreciate it if I could cover it. He said, "You're basically hosting too, Mama, since it's for family." I was quiet for a moment. I asked if I was invited to the dinner. There was a pause that lasted about 2 seconds too long. Then he said, "Oh, well, Mama, it's a long drive for you, and with your hip the way it's been, I just figured—" I said I understood. I said I would think about it. I transferred nothing that night. But I also didn't say that. I let him believe the money might be coming, and then I started making a few phone calls of my own. The first call was to my financial advisor, a woman named Renee, who Gerald and I had worked with for years. I told her what had been happening. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me if I had ever given Marcus access to any of my accounts directly. I said no, I had always initiated the transfers myself. She said that was good, and she suggested I set a transfer limit on my own account so that no single outgoing transfer could exceed $200 without a secondary confirmation step that only I could authorize. We did that together on the phone. The second call was to my neighbor James, who retired from the Charlotte Police Department 4 years ago and still has friends there. I didn't ask him to do anything official. I just mentioned, in the way that 2 old friends talk, that I was trying to get a better sense of what things actually cost up in Charlotte. He told me a few things. Among them, he mentioned that the restaurant Marcus had named, I had looked it up after the call, was a place where a table for 6 with drinks would likely run $600 to $800, not $400 to $500, and that Brianna's family had been visiting Charlotte regularly over the past year. He knew this because his former partner's wife was in the same book club as someone who lived on Marcus's street. I sat with that for a while too. What I understood now was this: the dinner was not for me. The dinner had never been for me. I was being asked to pay for a celebration of my daughter-in-law's family, to which I was not invited, using money I could not easily spare, because my son had learned over the course of 14 months that when he called me on a Tuesday evening with a careful story and just the right tone of reluctant embarrassment, I would say yes. I had become a line item. I did not call Marcus back that week. I told myself I was still deciding, but I think the truth is that I needed a few days to grieve something, not the money. I am old enough to know that money is just money, and it comes and it goes, and it matters less than people do. What I was grieving was the version of my son that I had been carrying in my heart, the one who called on Tuesday evenings because he missed my voice. I was beginning to understand that those calls had a different purpose, and that the warmth I felt when I saw his name on my screen was something he had learned to count on. That is a hard thing to understand about your own child. The Saturday of the dinner arrived. I had not sent the money. I had not said I wouldn't send it either. I had simply let the week pass quietly, responding to his check-in texts with brief and pleasant replies, giving nothing away. At around 7 in the evening, I was in my kitchen reheating some soup when my phone rang. It was Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. He called again 10 minutes later. I let that go too. Then a text came through. "Mama, please pick up. It's important." I called him back. His voice was tight in the way that voices get when someone is trying to stay composed in a public place. He said they were at the restaurant. He said the dinner was wrapping up, and when he went to pay, his card had been declined. He said he didn't understand it. He said, "Could I please send something right now? Even just enough to cover the bill because everyone was sitting there and it was embarrassing." I said, "Marcus, I'm so sorry to hear that. That sounds very stressful." He said, "Mama, I need you to send the money right now. The waiter is standing there." I said, "Baby, I have to be honest with you. I'm not going to be able to send money tonight." The silence that followed was not like the ordinary silence between two people on a phone. It had texture and temperature. I could hear the ambient sound of the restaurant, someone laughing at a nearby table, the small sounds of a celebration that I had not been invited to. He said, "What do you mean you can't?" I said, "I mean that I've been looking at my finances, and I've had to make some adjustments. I should have talked to you about this sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't. But I'm not in a position to keep covering these kinds of expenses." His voice dropped lower. He said, "Mama, now is not the time for this." I said, "I know, and I'm sorry. I hope you're able to work it out tonight. Give Chloe a kiss for me." I ended the call. I sat back down at my kitchen table. My soup had gone cold. I reheated it. I will not pretend that I felt triumphant in that moment. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the way I imagine a surgeon feels after a necessary procedure. Like something painful had been done for a reason that was right, but that didn't make the doing of it painless. What I felt most was tired. And underneath the tiredness, something else. Something that took me a few days to name. I think what it was, finally, was clarity. Marcus called the next morning. His voice was different, quieter. He said they had worked it out. Brianna's brother-in-law had covered the bill. He said he wanted to talk. I said I wanted that too. We had a long conversation that Sunday. The longest, most honest one we'd had in years. He admitted that things with his finances were not what he had let me believe. He and Brianna had been living at the edge of what they earned, and rather than cut back, he had found it easier. His word was easier to call me. He said he knew it wasn't right. He said he had told himself I didn't mind because I never said no. I told him that not saying no is not the same as not minding. I told him that I had given him $9,550 over 8 months. I told him I had the spreadsheet. He was quiet for a long time after that. I told him I loved him. I told him I would always love him. I told him that I would help him in real ways, sitting down with Renee together and looking at his budget, pointing him toward a financial counselor, being a resource in ways that didn't hollow out my own retirement. I told him I would not be sending money anymore without a written agreement about repayment, and that I would not be covering expenses that had nothing to do with Chloe's well-being or a genuine emergency. He didn't like hearing it. He was not gracious about it at first. He said some things that stung. But I had 31 years of practice keeping calm while someone said something unkind, and I used every bit of it. Before we hung up, I said one more thing. I said, Marcus, your father worked hard so that I would be taken care of when he was gone. Every dollar you took from me was a dollar your father left behind for that purpose. I need you to think about that. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, Yes, ma'am. That was 6 months ago. We are still in the process of finding our way back to each other. He has started seeing a financial counselor, which I am grateful for. We have talked more honestly in these past 6 months than in the 3 years before them. Chloe visited last month and spent a weekend in my house, and watching her sleep in the room where I used to read to Marcus when he was small did something good to my heart that I didn't know I needed. There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I had asked more questions in those early months instead of being so eager to help. I wish I had trusted the quiet unease I felt when the reasons started feeling rehearsed. I wish I had understood sooner that love without honesty is not protection. It is just a soft place for someone to hide from the consequences of their own choices. But I also know this. I am still here. I still have my house, and Gerald's memory in every room of it, and a granddaughter who calls me Grammy and means it. I have Paulette, who told me the truth when I needed it, and Carol, who said the right thing without knowing she was saying it. I have 31 years of fourth graders who learned how to multiply fractions and write in cursive, and I like to think a few things about the importance of doing the right thing, even when it is hard. I am 65 years old. I have worked all my life, and I have loved all my life. And I have made my share of mistakes, but I have always tried to be the kind of woman Gerald would have been proud of. I think he would be proud of that phone call. I think he would say, Dorothy, you waited a little long, but you got there. He would be right. I usually do.